Americans are constantly hearing about problems with our criminal justice system, like racial profiling and prison conditions. But today, we're going to talk about people you don't usually hear a lot about: prosecutors. Prosecutors are the people who represent the government in court. In other words, they represent us. But what if they're not representing all of us? I'll explain in a segment called How Did We Get Here? Tonight, we're going to talk about prosecutors. You probably know them from shows like Law and Order, or The Good Wife, or Fancy Justice Lady who can really pull off a hat. Okay, I made up that last one. Or maybe I'm here from the future to tell you about your new favorite show starring Amber Ruffin in a hat. Prosecutors are so important, they even have their own signature sound. Oh. You know it. That's actually the noise prosecutors make when they orgasm. Scientific fact. But here's the thing. That is also one of the whitest sounds of all time, because it turns out that as of 2019, 95% of prosecutors were white. And man, 95% is so white, it's like, I'd like to speak to the manager white. 95% is front row seats at a Billy Joel concert white. America's prosecutors are so white, they think El DeBarge is a giant Mexican boat. And the racial disparity exists all over the country. But hey, why does it matter? Lots of things are super white and don't really hurt anyone, like living in Vermont or saying, I'll be there in a jiffy. How long is a jiffy, white people? I need a number. So let's talk about why the race of prosecutors matters in three parts. First, arrests, then charges, and finally sentencing. We'll start with arrests. Now, I know what you're thinking. Aren't cops the ones in charge of arresting people? Well, sort of. See, there's no point in arresting someone if they're not going to be charged with a crime. And prosecutors have basically absolute power in deciding whether a person gets criminally charged. That's right. Prosecutors have the ability to ruin lives in a split second, like plane crashes or the Cool Ranch Doritos Locos Taco Supreme combo at Taco Bell. But I'm still eating that mug. And there are times when prosecutors choose not to press charges when they clearly should. For example, police wanted to arrest the three men who chased and murdered Ahmaud Arbery, but the local DA, Jackie Johnson, wouldn't allow it. Then the case was transferred to this prosecutor who said there were no grounds for arrest. Then they gave the case to a third white prosecutor who still didn't arrest anybody. It wasn't until cell phone video of the murder was released that the state appointed this woman to the job, and she finally charged Ahmaud Arbery's killers. Basically, those white prosecutors treated actual murderers the same way you might treat a dog who pooped on your living room rug. Cover it up, pretend it never happened, and hope that someone eventually comes along and cleans it up for you. Since then, the three killers have been convicted by two separate juries. And as for whether the prosecutor's office was actually racist, it is worth noting that the first DA actually refused to prosecute the murderers because one of them had worked with her in the prosecutor's office. That's right, the man who was just convicted of a federal hate crime worked for decades in the office of the district attorney. So just like in Scream, the call was coming from inside the house. But arrests aren't the only place where race plays a role, because once you're in custody, prosecutors also get to decide what crimes you're going to be charged with, and that can be biased as well. A Harvard study found that DAs charged black suspects with crimes that carry worse penalties. They ask for higher bail for black defendants, they're less likely to offer black people plea bargains, and they ask judges to sentence black defendants to longer terms in prison. In every single possible way, black people face worse outcomes than white people, which is the opposite of what happens during a line dance. I love it. And even if somehow you are fairly arrested and charged, racism can also play a role in sentencing. Now, I know you think I'm going to give you a bunch of stats about how judges and juries give longer sentences to black people, and that's true, but it's not the most important thing, because over 90% of felony convictions are actually the result of plea deals. And the terms of those deals are offered by, you guessed it, the prosecutors. Oh, good for them. They met someone. A recent recent New York City study showed that black defendants were more likely than whites to be offered plea deals that included jail or prison time. And it's not just true in New York. Take these two Ohio women who were convicted of embezzlement, Carla Hopkins and Debbie Bosworth. Now, first, yes, Debbie Bosworth sounds exactly like the name I would make up for that white lady, but it's also her actual name. Now, Carla stole $42,000, while Debbie, on the other hand, stole almost $250,000. And Carla was sentenced to 18 months in prison, while Debbie was given just 10 months. Just kidding, 6. Just kidding, 0. She was given 0 prison time. These are two women in the same county, in the same court system, who were sentenced within 1 year of one another. I wonder what could have made the difference. Basically, think of making a fair plea deal like singing along to a Jimmy Buffett song. Anyone can do it, but it's gonna go a whole lot better if you're white. It's not applicable to me in Margaritaville.
Yeah.
Is that Jimmy Buffett?
I don't know.
That's fair, you shouldn't. Now, I know I've spent all this time telling you about problems with white prosecutors, and to be fair, we don't know for sure that black prosecutors would fix the criminal justice system. We only know that in studies, black judges showed less of a bias against black defendants, that black cops are less likely to use force, and that juries with at least one black member are less likely to convict a black suspect. Does that mean that black prosecutors will do a better job dealing with racial disparities? How the hell would I know? Because here's the thing, there aren't enough of them to count. But we need to find out, because the next time I hear this, I only want to be thinking about one thing. Sweet, sweet lovemaking. How did we get here?